And so there's a lot of witty banter in there, arguing about whether it's better to build wealth and then distribute it to the poor, or to hold to your idealism and serve the poor by living poorly.
Yeah.
And of course, Chesterton had his own Christian answer to that, which was, well, sure, you have a vibrant market and you have a strong capitalist economy, but you don't let it accumulate into the hands of the few, but you make sure that there's a distribution network. That's one of the other things of Chesterton was when he's talking about wonder, and you quoted those sections about, we live in a universe of wonders, but we're losing our capacity to wonder. And this incapacity to wonder feeds our anxiety and depression and addiction to screens.
Welcome to the Subversive Orthodoxy podcast. I'm your host, Travis Mullen, and I'm excited to have you with us. This is a podcast about philosophy and meaning. It is about how we as humans withstand the challenges of our cultures. It is about the general Judeo-Christian revelation of God in the world and how the bloodiest century ever recorded couldn't kill that revelation. It's also about how that revelation, tossed aside as archaic, outdated, and obsolete, may be the very life-giving power we need to resist this distracted techno state we're living in, full of anxiety, depression, and teenage suicide.
It's great entertainment, thrilling entertainment. It's the inside story packed with drama.
Gilbert Keith Chesterton was born on May 29, 1874, in Kensington, London, into a warm, middle-class family with literary leanings and spiritual curiosity. His father worked for a real estate firm, but was also a creative spirit, a man who filled the family home with books and art and amateur theatrical productions. Chesterton inherited that blend of practicality and wonder, and from a young age he was more interested in drawing than debating, more inclined to wonder than to worry. Chesterton's childhood was, by his own account, happily sheltered, yet England was in transition. The late Victorian era was a time of empire and industry, but also of deep spiritual uncertainty. The old religious certainties were crumbling under the pressure of scientific rationalism, urban poverty, and moral relativism. The optimism of the Enlightenment was giving way to the confusion of modernism. In this world, Chesterton was born, a boy with a sketchpad, a booming laugh, and a mind like a kaleidoscope. He was educated at St. Paul's School and later attended the Slade School of Art. He never earned a degree. By his early 20s, he was struggling with depression and spiritual darkness, even experimenting with the occult. But he also began reading widely, particularly Christian thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, St. Francis of Assisi, and even the mystics. These, alongside his philosophical sense of justice and love of common people, began to slowly shape the man who would become the most joyful apologist of the 20th century. Chesterton came of age as a writer during a period of enormous ideological conflict. Industrial capitalism had created vast wealth and deep inequality. Marxism and socialism were offering materialist solutions to spiritual problems. Scientific positivism provided objectivity, but delivered a sterile and mechanistic worldview. Chesterton saw these trends not as progress, but as forms of forgetting beauty, personhood, forgetting mystery, and the miracle of existence. He responded not with bitter protest, but with wonder. He believed that the true rebellion was to embrace gratitude in the face of nihilism and to affirm the goodness of the world, rather than simply deconstruct it. But Chesterton's vision wasn't limited to the realm of ideas. He also sought practical alternatives to the economic and political systems he found dehumanizing. Alongside his friend Hilaire Belloc, Chesterton helped popularize a political philosophy known as distributism, a bold and subversive third way between the excesses of capitalism and the coercion of socialism. Rooted in Catholic social teaching, especially Pope Leo VIII's Rerum Novarum, distributism argued that economic freedom and dignity could only be preserved if property was widely distributed among families, craftsmen, and small farmers, not hoarded by monopolies or managed by the state. Chesterton didn't invent the theory, but he gave it its moral heart and imaginative power. In works like What's Wrong with the World and The Outline of Sanity, he laid out his dream of a society built not on greed or government control, but on subsidiarity, stewardship, and joy. Though it never became a mainstream political movement, at least not yet, distributism inspired movements like the Catholic Workers and lives on in conversations about localism, sustainability, and the humane economy. It was yet another way Chesterton challenged the powerful assumptions of his age, with reason, laughter, and a deep belief in the sacredness of ordinary life. As a journalist and essayist, he was prolific, writing over 4,000 newspaper columns, hundreds of poems, novels, plays, and theological works. He never seemed to stop writing, thinking, or debating. His best-known works include Orthodoxy, 1908, in which he lays out his spiritual autobiography, arguing that Christianity is the only worldview that takes the world seriously enough to rejoice in it. In The Everlasting Man in 1925, he offered a sweeping vision of history that so impressed a young atheist named C.S. Lewis that it helped lead to his conversion. Chesterton's writing style was unique, whimsical but pointed, paradoxical, profoundly moral. He was a master of turning ideas on their heads to make them shine in a new light. He would say things like, "Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly," or "The madman is not the man who has lost his reason. He is the man who has lost everything but his reason." These were not just clever lines. They were spiritual diagnostics of modern man's condition. Though he was a Christian long before, Chesterton officially converted to the Roman Catholic Church in 1922 at the age of 48. After years of spiritual searching, his faith wasn't abstract or merely doctrinal. It was incarnational, mystical, and sacramental. He saw the Christian story as the truest fairy tale ever told, the infinite becoming finite, the creator becoming creature, the crucified Christ offering redemption through suffering and joy. Economically, Chesterton's life was modest. He was never wealthy, nor was he particularly concerned with money. He lived simply with his wife, Frances, to whom he was deeply devoted. She managed much of his business affairs and kept him grounded. His fame did not translate into fortune, but his influence far exceeded the financial and far exceeded his lifetime. Chesterton's work left a permanent mark on modern Christian thought. He helped revive the intellectual credibility of Orthodoxy at a time when it was considered obsolete. He inspired C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Dorothy Day, Marshall McLuhan, and even popes and political dissidents. His words continue to echo in places where laughter, wonder, and truth still matter. Chesterton died in 1936, but he remains paradoxically one of the most contemporary voices we can read today. In a world addicted to cynicism, Chesterton teaches us laughter. In a world obsessed with progress, he invites us to rediscover the miracle of being. And in a culture that believes faith must be narrow, Chesterton reminds us that orthodoxy is, in fact, a wild and generous adventure. As Robert Anchosti puts it in Subversive Orthodoxy, Chesterton's genius was to show us that orthodoxy is not a retreat from the world, but the re-enchantment of it. He didn't defend Christianity as an escape from reality, but as the only worldview that makes reality bearable because it is beautiful, purposeful, and anchored in joy. And with no further ado, I'd like to bring on my counterpart to this podcast, who wrote the book Subversive Orthodoxy, Mr. Professor Robert Anchosti.
Hey, Travis. Good to see you.
Welcome, Professor. Thanks for doing another podcast episode with me.
Well, this is going to be a fun one. Chesterton's a lot of fun.
A very fun one.
Yeah.
So to give our readers that was some of the bio. Now here's a little rundown of his notable works. 1904, he wrote The Napoleon of Notting Hill, a satirical novel. In 1905, he wrote Heretics, where he was actually he was actually critiquing intellectual writers of his day, H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, and Rudyard Kipling. And Professor's going to tell us about how he actually ended up debating them in person too. Orthodoxy, 1908, which was his spiritual autobiography. The Man Who Was Thursday, A Nightmare, 1908, a philosophical thriller, which sounds awesome.
Yeah.
There's a couple here I never heard about, and they sound
Yeah.
awesome. And
Mhm.
I'll point out the one that sounds the coolest in a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
What's Wrong with the World? Political and Social Commentary, and this is the book where he talks about distributism,
Mhm.
partially, and he talks a lot about the family and like just social fabric of society, which in a lot of our public debates, like for example, so relevant to this, when he wrote "What's Wrong with the World," he talks so much about family, the church, the social fabrics that we used to have in society, at least in the Western European and American societies, that that was some of the solutions, was the family, was the church, was the local community in his writings.
Mhm.
And today I was listening to Bernie Sanders on Joe Rogan. It just happened I think in the last week. And I don't hear Bernie Sanders having that imagination about family, about churches, about social
Yeah.
communities. It's all about government. So
Yeah.
that's a big difference of what we have today versus what a thinker like Chesterton was thinking. Like he had other ways of solving problems other than government, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Father Brown Stories is 1910, a detective fiction, which is interesting. He's all over the place with these types of books. The Ballad of the White Horse is 1911, an epic poem. And then my favorite that I have not read, but just I found out about it, was The Flying Inn. And this is a fiction satirical dystopia. And the synopsis was kind of really intriguing to me. In a future England where alcohol is banned and political correctness reigns, a pub on wheels becomes a symbol of rebellion and joy. That one sounds awesome. Then the Everlasting Man, 1925, Christian Apologetics, and that's the book that led C.S. Lewis to Christ. In a sense, had an impact on him and helped him in his conversion. Then another one on Francis of Assisi, 1923, a biography, a spiritual commentary. And then another biography on Thomas Aquinas, 1933, The Dumb Ox. Another biography and theology. Reason and orthodoxy are not enemies; they're allies in the pursuit of truth. Was kind of his theme on that one. And then last one here for notable works: the thing, why I am Catholic, 1929, Essays and Apologetics. He claimed that the Catholic Church is not a prison but a home full of strange treasures. As far as some of his themes, you'll notice some continued threads from Kierkegaard. Number one is paradox. Truth often comes cloaked in contradiction. Wonder, which was also seen in Kierkegaard. The ordinary is sacred when it's seen rightly. Tradition versus modernity. Same, we've seen that thread through a lot of these guys. Progress must be grounded in enduring truths. Personhood and freedom. A lot about freedom in Chesterton. Joy as rebellion. Now, laughter and festivities and, creativity in general seems to be a huge thing for him. And that must have been passed down to C.S. Lewis. They both had that poetry, had the comedy. C.S. Lewis and Tolkien drew too.
Mm-hmm.
He drew his own illustrations.
Yeah.
So these guys are very artistic and intellectual.
That's right.
But when I was coming of age, theology was in its own little ghetto, like walls. It had its walls. Like it was just theology. There was no overlap with creativity. I mean, we knew about C.S. Lewis, but we were just talking about mere Christianity. We weren't diving into the space trilogy or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know where all that got lost on me. Like from the Christianity of Chesterton and Lewis to my generation in America, where did they chop art out of the equation?
Well, theology got very academic, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the
And
thing.
talking to theologians, um, the C.S. Lewis was Oxford Don, right? And
What
uh,
was that?
C.S. Lewis was a Don from Oxford, right? He went to college and he was a professor. And
I'm
Tolkien,
sorry. Can you just tell me what a don means in that context?
like a tenured professor at Oxford.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then Tolkien was, a first-rate scholar of languages and a graduate from, I think, Cambridge. Uh,
Yeah.
and so, like uh, Chesterton didn't graduate from college. He
Mm,
Yeah, and he went right into journalism, and,
yeah.
and he considered himself a journalist his whole life, and he wrote columns in newspapers. And
Thousands.
thousands of them,
Said 4,000.
and essays. And you can get a lot of them for free on the internet. You can get a lot of them. You can see some of them on YouTube. They have people read them to you, um, and and those aren't those are in addition to those major works that you mentioned that people recognize as Chesterton's sort of canon of great works. But he became famous. He had these public events where he'd take on all the top intellectuals of England of his day, and they'd pack houses in London and not quite stadiums, but
I
they'd be.
wonder I wonder if things hadn't gotten so academic at the time to let some uneducated guy debate these highly educated people, you know?
Well, yeah, I think they probably still had debates at the Oxford Union, like when Buckley debated James Baldwin. That was a major cultural event in the 60s. But these they didn't have television, and they didn't have radio yet, right? Or radio is just in the coming
Infant stages.
infant stages. So these were major sort of entertainment, intellectual events that were um, performances and philosophical, theological events. And every intellectual in London would show up, whether they were suffragettes or whether they were bohemian poets or whether they were atheists or whether they were believers. They'd all pack the house and they'd watch H.G. Wells and
It's
Gilbert.
pretty
Uh,
pretty awesome.
yeah, Chesterton go at it. And from all accounts, Chesterton loved H.G. Wells. They loved each other. They respected each other, not like our people who disagree. And they disagreed on every single topic that came up. And
Mm.
so it was just this wonderful sort of conversation of just two guys who knew what they believed and weren't going to back down unless they were given some pretty good reasons to question themselves. And then he also did that with Bernard Shaw.
Yeah, I was actually about to read that one. That one's number 2 on the fun facts.
Yeah, go into the thing about George Bernard Shaw. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, number 2 on the fun facts. He debated George Bernard Shaw dozens of times. So this is a lot of times.
Yeah,
dozens of times.
more than H.G. Wells. Yeah,
always respectfully, often hilariously. You can imagine the crowds are laughing. I mean, this guy is a comic too, not just an intellectual. He's a comic. Chesterton and Shaw disagreed on nearly everything, especially politics and religion, but they remained great friends. Chesterton once said, "The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder." And Shaw replied, "Yes, and Chesterton is a wonder."
Yes.
So the crowd probably went wild there. But here's some of the fun facts. So number 1, physical stature. No, I mean, most people don't know, if they don't know much about Chesterton, they don't know this fun fact. He was 6'4", 300 pounds. And he had the personality kind of like Doc in Back to the Future. He was like a mad scientist, often lost in his own city. He was famously absent-minded. Once his wife sent him a telegram saying, once he sent his wife a telegram saying, "I am in Market Harborough. Where ought I to be?" To which she replied, "Home." Before texting, he sent her a telegram saying, "Where am I supposed to be right now?" Oh man, that's funny. He always carried a cane with a sword inside of it. Like you
Yeah.
pull off the tip and there's a sword.
Yeah.
And he said it wasn't as a gimmick. It was because he was genuinely believed life was an adventure, and he was a romantic in the truest sense, whimsical, dramatic, and ready to duel nonsense with wit.
Mhm.
He illustrated his own books, considered himself an artist first. Before becoming a writer, he studied at the Slade School, like we mentioned, and illustrated some of his early work, and remained a lifelong doodler, often sketching in the margins of his manuscripts.
Yeah, he might have made graphic novels had he been around to see the printing technology for that.
Yeah.
That would have been really great to see that.
Well, I'm not sure what you're saying there, Professor, because Blake was doing that before this
Yeah,
time.
that's right. Blake and he have a lot in common, don't they?
Yeah.
Although I think Chesterton was wittier and more satirical, and
Oh, yeah.
more politically engaged too. In a way, as a journalist, he took on social problems and in those debates, he took on big social ideas.
Yeah. It
It,
sounds like extremely culturally engaged and politically as far as those debates go, because he would have been debating everything.
yeah, and Bernard Shaw was funny too. I mean, Bernard Shaw wrote Major Barbara, and I don't know if you know that play,
I don't.
but it's about a young woman whose father is a rich industrialist, and she is humiliated by his money and his ignorance of the poor, and so she joins uh, the Salvation Army, and she becomes a general in the Salvation Army in order to spy her father.
Hmm.
But in the course of the play, um, the Salvation Army starts running out of money, and a lot of their ministries are falling apart. And so uh, her father comes to the rescue at the very end, and the industrialist uh, takes all his ill-gotten gains to fund the Salvation Army. And Bernard Shaw has this wonderful uh, laugh at the end of the Christian who sacrificed everything, didn't have the money to buy the bread to pay the poor, but the industrialist who built an industrial empire now has to come to the rescue of the church.
Hmm.
And so uh, George Bernard Shaw that was his joke against social activists who distrusted money making capitalists, and so he made the capitalist the winner of the hero of that play. Um, and so there's a lot of witty banter in there, arguing about whether it's better to build wealth and then distribute it uh, to the poor, uh, or to hold to your idealism and serve the poor by living poorly.
Hmm. Yeah.
And of course, Chesterton had his own Christian answer to that, which was, well, sure, you have a vibrant market and you have a strong capitalist economy, but you don't let it accumulate into the hands of the few, but you make sure that there's a distribution network, and you don't have to wait until your daughter joins the Salvation Army to set up social institutions that can help make that a possibility.
Hmm.
And so, like for example, in his debates with H.G. Wells, H.G. Wells was this, progressive scientist who who had these beliefs that science and technology and would solve all the economic social problems in the long run.
Yeah.
And he was and George Bernard Shaw was sort of a true believing socialist, that what we have to do is we have to get the money from the capitalist and give it to the state or give it to the social um, agencies, which is not exactly distributism either.
No.
And so I think it was very typical of him to try to uh, show the virtues of both sides of an argument like that, and try to synthesize some sort of answer that was reasonable but not dogmatic.
You mean Chesterton would try to do that?
Chesterton, yeah,
Like he would
Chesterton.
try to synthesize and use some humor and some common sense?
Yeah, that what would not be dogmatic. It's
Yeah.
like the system of your ideas is rational, but in real life, a rich man wants to be acknowledged for his contribution, and you can thank him. You don't need to drive him out of town. and the Salvation Army, they need to be sort of appreciated as well, and their service to the poor. And so, the father and the daughter reconcile at the end, in a kind of rough. George Bernard Shaw satire ending. And I'm sure Chesterton appreciated the humor in it, and the fact that both the industrialist and his daughter had to give up their dogmatic absolutes about economics and about religion in order to meet that center.
In order to appreciate each other?
Yeah, in order to appreciate each other. And
Yeah.
and he would try to sort of demonstrate that in his own arguments. There was, what was it that he said that I always thought was a brilliant uh, aphorism. Um, it was about being. He said that bigotry is not believing that you're right. Uh, you should believe that you're right. Bigotry is not admitting that you don't live up to that, or that what you think is right maybe needs to be corrected. And that's his rationality, right? Take your point of view, defend it, but if you're wrong, own up to it.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
don't just try to squash the opposition who has essentially showed you where you're wrong.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's fun that humility is the Christian virtue that makes thought great.
Yeah.
Not the pride of the ideologue. And so, to the degree that a church becomes doctrinaire, to the degree that a bishop knows it all, or you join a church, let's say the Catholicism had a reputation in the 50s in the United States as being having all the answers, or wanting to
Mm.
have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so people would join the church because they wanted to know the answers to all of these impossible questions to answer. And Chesterton would say, "Well, no, you join the church because the church knows what it believes. But then if it's wrong, you call them on it, or you don't believe what's wrong. You evolve with it and say, well, the church needs to evolve into a greater knowledge of itself, not just uphold its authority."
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredibly sane. It's I guess you would say it's post-industrial thinking, 100 years before its time. But at the time, uh, I guess in the 40s, and was certainly at the beginning of the 20th century, ideology was considered the vehicle of thinking. The Communist Party versus the uh, democratic ideals of the West.
Oh, it still is now.
Yeah. Well,
Like your ideology is what drives your thinking in most cases,
yeah, and
unfortunately,
yeah, I think you're right.
because
And
it makes people so aggressive and embattled rather than listening and understanding and trying to understand the other side's view.
yeah, and having a little bit of sense of humor about what you think and what you believe, and being humble enough to listen, to be educated by somebody that you wouldn't think would educate you, like maybe your daughter in Major Barbara, or maybe an industrialist in Major Barbara. They might have things to teach you, but it isn't that your values are wrong. It's that you're just not uh, doing those values well. They're not sophisticated enough in your hands and in your head yet. And there's a lot for you to still learn. And that's not a bad thing. To be able to embrace paradox is a mark of high intelligence and to transcend the either or into the both and, or if not both and, at least the paradoxical third option that was not on the table to begin with. That's not only intelligent, but it's also turns out it's entertaining to the thousands of people that come to watch you in the stadium with H.G. Wells.
Yeah. You just said something. What did you say? Paradox, ability to handle paradox is a sign of high intelligence.
Yeah, I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald that said that the mark of a true intelligence is to hold two contradictory truths in your mind at the same time without immediately reaching after for resolution.
That's so that resonates with me so much because I think of myself as a pretty smart person, and I know sometimes when I'm talking about something with somebody who doesn't think of themselves as very smart,
Yeah,
like they've told me,
yeah, yeah,
they'll say things like, I don't know how you think about that because I'm holding two things in tension
yeah.
that I say, well, you can hold things in tension, and they're
Mhm.
like, well, you know, like for example, an older generation that wants Fox News or MSNBC, and it's like you can actually criticize both sides and have a middle view on things.
Yeah,
But to them, to somebody who's rigidly stuck in one rut or the other,
mhm.
they can't do that. Like it's just too much tension in the head.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not saying they're not smart, but they may have fallen into a not smart pattern where it's like you are now you are in an unintelligent way of thinking where you are stuck in a rut where you cannot hold tension between two ideas or hold two parties accountable to not getting something right either or. Like neither side has something right.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that happens a lot too. And that's not I'm not just talking about politics. Like that could be in a lot of things where neither answer is exactly correct. But when we have a binary black and white thinking, we need one to be right because there's just too much tension otherwise. I can't handle it.
yeah.
I've seen that in people. It's really interesting, either intellectual or psychological issue.
Well, it's a product of our culture, and Chesterton, but because he didn't, I mean, he went to art school, but he didn't go to college, kind of like Blake. Uh, and so at one point he said, the thing about not going to college, it gave me the freedom not to worship education. And
Chesterton said that.
yeah,
Oh, I love that.
and so education is a good thing, but it's not like if it addicts you to either or thinking or a kind of um, rationality that is weak in imagination, empathy, ethics, joy, happiness. I think in one of his aphorisms was uh, a poet very seldom goes crazy, but mathematicians go crazy a lot more because they the only virtue that they embrace unquestioningly is rationality. And if they get off on the wrong foot to seeing the dark side of life, they can find themselves convinced that there is no joy. And one of the reasons Chesterton converted was because he found joy in faith. And, you know,
Wow.
and that's interesting that uh, C.S. Lewis,
That's
uh,
why I said wow, because that was
yeah,
his testimony too.
for joy, you know.
Wow, that's so weird. I never thought of that. I didn't know
Yeah,
Chesterton said that too.
yeah. And so it was reason's good, and he's one of the most reasonable debaters, you know, in the world. But it isn't the final story, and it doesn't replace love. And that's one of the other things of Chesterton was when he's talking about wonder, and you quoted those sections about, you know, we live in a universe of wonders, but we're losing our capacity to wonder. And this incapacity to wonder feeds our anxiety and depression and addiction to screens.
Hmm.
Although he didn't know that that would happen, that there would
Be
be
a
screen.
byproduct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would addict you to other things. So to find the joy in your experience is to see the mystery in life. And there's a wonder, I don't think it's in my book, but there's a wonderful in Orthodoxy, Chesterton's book, in which I got the idea of subversive orthodoxy. When I talk about orthodoxy in subversive orthodoxy, I'm not talking about Russian orthodoxy, and I'm not talking about the doctrines that are orthodox rather than heretical. I'm talking more about what Chesterton called orthodoxy, which was this much more expansive idea of the way of life that comes with Christian faith. And it's kind of like the Catholic or Christian version of the perennial philosophy that Huxley talked about. But Huxley's perennial philosophy was kind of individualistic, right? The spiritual practices of the East and how it related to the spiritual practices of the West, and his view of an inner life, where Chesterton's view of this larger philosophy is Christian orthodoxy. That's his name for that.
Hmm.
And that includes churches and families and children and all the different aspects of a community that is trying to live the Christian vision, but knows that they're just not really very good at it. And that was
Hmm.
one of his great. I just love the phrase, you know, he said, you know, people, everybody, you know, you might not think it, but most people, in fact, he thought every person searched for truth and justice and wanted to love their neighbor. They just weren't very good at it, he said. And he included himself in that description, you know. And that's why
That's
the
sort of like gracious and humble of a quote.
yeah, yeah, and that part of being humble is sort of seeing where you don't uh, take yourself too seriously. You think your reason is truth. You think your dogma is important, and part of history, what history teaches you, is that what everybody believes is true now is the dogma that'll be let go as the social, cultural, institutional order transforms into the next historical phase. And
And yeah, we'll get to that when we
yeah,
talk about the
yeah,
five deaths.
yeah, the five deaths of the
You're jumping
faith.
ahead.
Yeah.
But let's back up a little and
Okay.
finish the fun facts, and then we'll get back into
Okay.
maybe we'll jump into the five deaths then.
Okay.
Um, a few of the fun ones were still coming, and they'll probably spark a few other conversations.
Yeah.
But number six, he dictated many of his books while lying in bed.
Yeah.
I love this one. He said he was often worked. Chesterton often worked from bed due to exhaustion or illness, and dictated to his ever patient secretary. He also once said that lying down was a perfectly reasonable posture for thinking.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
somebody probably asked him, and he's like, "It's a perfectly reasonable posture for thinking." which I love that. Number
Well,
seven.
the other thing we didn't say about him is that, he was 6'4", he weighed 300 pounds, and he had that cane, but he also had a cigar in his mouth most of the time.
Yeah,
So he'd have this
I've seen that.
big stogie that he was smoking while he's explaining the universe.
So he's all about health.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
He would really be an embarrassment to the fitness megachurch, where
yeah.
giving a talk to the yoga class about Christian Orthodoxy would be.
Now, doing this deep dive on Chesterton, I knew there was a link between him and C.S. Lewis, but I didn't know the artsy aspect, like the creative writing aspect, and also the humor aspect and the joy aspect. Like that's really interesting. And one thing that really reminds me of Chesterton in C.S. Lewis now that I know all this,
Yeah.
is his response to a homeless man. I may have told this on a
Now,
previous.
whose response? Chesterton's or
No,
Lewis?
C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
So the story goes that C.S. Lewis was walking with a buddy in Oxford, and a homeless man was sitting there, and he asked for a pound, and C.S. Lewis gave him a pound, and the guy said, "Why'd you give that guy money? Don't you know he's just going to spend it on a pint?"
Mm-hmm.
And C.S. Lewis goes, well, figure if I didn't give it to him, then I was just going to spend it on a pint." Which is the same humility and humor as Chesterton.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So then he proposed the opposite of funny isn't serious, it's dull. So dull things are the opposite of funny.
You should be funny. Yeah.
He saw humor as a spiritual weapon. That's interesting.
Yeah.
He said Christianity is not too solemn, but too serious to be taken humorlessly. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, this is not the same person you get every day. This is like a very unique person.
Yeah.
He once joined the wrong political rally by accident.
Yeah.
He showed up.
Right.
Showed up at the wrong rally.
It was a socialist event, and he went up and he started talking about distributism, I guess.
Yeah. It says he began speaking, thinking it was a different event altogether. Yeah. And rather than leaving, he stayed and gave a speech critiquing both capitalism and socialism. I mean, that's so amazing.
I do have another story about his public lectures. When he was with H.G. Wells one time, he came on stage, and he was huge, and he had his cane and his stogie, and to call attention away from everybody that was kind of looking at him like this slovenly guy who was good. He said, "Well, I'd like to call your attention to H.G. Wells, my esteemed partner today in our discussion. He's a small man, but he has a big head and a long neck, and he has eyes that gaze into the future like a prophet. In short, he's kind of a combination between a giraffe and a microscope. So when you get offended by my slovenly appearance, I want you to think of that image while you're looking at HG while he's."
That's crazy.
And it showed that it was at one, both an introduction that showed that they were friends and could rib one another about their appearances, but it also showed that the tone of those events, that they were kind of half philosophy, half theology, half roast.
Comedy mixed
in with witticisms and things.
That'd be fun if we had that back. That platform does not exist right now, I don't think.
Only in the roast, but the roasts have gotten so kind of mean-spirited in some ways. They try to put each
Yeah.
other down, and occasionally you'll get a good-spirited one, but Chesterton apparently was like that all the time.
Okay, and then our last two fun facts, and then we're
Yeah,
moving on.
yeah,
Is
right, right.
he inspired C.S. Lewis' conversion, which we already mentioned, but C.S. Lewis said that the book, Chesterton's book, The Everlasting Man, he
Mm-hmm.
said the book, quote unquote, the book that baptized my intellect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then last one, he was nominated for sainthood. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, the Bishop of Northampton opened an investigation into Chesterton's cause for canonization. While it hasn't advanced formally due to debates about his legacy and some theological concerns, many Catholics still refer to him affectionately as Saint Gilbert. Saint Gilbert.
Well, I'm thinking, and this is just speculation, but the Cold War, the ideological wars of the 20s and 30s, and the Cold War that followed, made common sense an enemy of the people by all these extremists of the right and the left, and
Mhm.
and the and theology got very almost turned into philosophy, analytic philosophy, and all of these
And textual criticism.
and textual criticism and new criticism and all of the trying to turn the humanities into soft sciences, make them a little more science than soft, maybe made it harder for Chesterton, who was simply a middle class British Christian with an IQ of about 3,000 or whatever it was, uh, made it a little harder for him to enter sainthood. I mean, what were they going to make him, a doctor of the church? I mean, he had no theory. He wasn't trading theories of anthropology with Delphi or other major systems builders. And maybe it's time to bring back the inquiry into his sainthood, because he's probably offering us something we need for the next phase of Western civilization that's got to break out of its ideological blinders and uh,
Oh,
preoccupation
yeah.
preoccupation with certainty and all of those uh,
Well,
dark.
I feel like this podcast is about that. It's about finding in each of these people what can take us forward, you know?
Yeah,
And I think some of them it's like breadcrumbs, but then some of them it might be a whole modality, like Chesterton and Kierkegaard.
yeah, yeah. I
I
think
mean,
so.
a whole way of thinking, infrastructure of values,
Yes,
not
yeah,
just one value. You know, like you got with Solzhenitsyn, you have the deep honesty, and like the thread goes through all of us that turns these people into animals.
yeah,
Um, you have there's a real morality you get from Solzhenitsyn,
yeah,
but you don't get a whole framework of worldview. But with Kierkegaard and Chesterton, you get like 10 things that are all interconnected that they're proposing. Just very very exciting and invigorating to learn about.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you can imagine Chesterton, taking Solzhenitsyn out for a beer. I imagine they would get along, and they would have a lot to say, but to each other, um, especially in terms of their shared faith. But at a certain point, I have a feeling that Solzhenitsyn would get very serious,
Yeah.
and Chesterton would listen. I'm sure that's what he would do,
Hmm.
because he would be in the presence of somebody who knew some things about suffering and about how dark things could get that he could learn from. But I
Yeah.
don't. But I don't think he would give up his joy. I
Hmm.
think I think he would afterwards uh, find the humor even in that, and in the overreach even in that, uh,
Yeah.
which would be why we need a Saint Chesterton. That
And
would.
I also think Saint Gilbert could have been a nice pick me up for Kierkegaard when he's depressed.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They could have been um, buddies on YouTube or something, or
Well, and the way they wrote,
yeah.
creatively, and Kierkegaard with his pseudonyms,
Oh yeah, he was.
imagine what they could have done in a debate style
Oh
of writing together.
yeah, yeah. The multiple personalities and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they both have that extreme creativity of thought, with thought,
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's
So
so true.
let's move into our five deaths concept from him, and I'll read the couple paragraphs from the book, from your book,
Uh-huh.
and then I'll say my take about it in relation to deconstruction, and then I want to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on it,
Okay.
on how significant of a concept this was. This was in his Everlasting Man, right?
Yeah, it's I think it's chapter 6 in Everlasting Man.
Okay, so this is on page 16 of Subversive Orthodoxy professor's book, where this is not the chapter. If any of you are following along with the book, this isn't in the chapter on Chesterton. This is actually in the original intro of the whole book. So I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on like page 2
16,
of the whole book.
Page 16 of the intro.
Yeah, which is page 2 of the actual book
Oh, okay.
of the text.
Okay.
As it starts to talk. So
Right.
I'm going to read 2 paragraphs here because I feel like I underlined them all. I had all these notes and how much it related to current deconstruction in our culture. And we're going to hit the pause button there for the end of episode 8, which is part 1 of Chesterton. You can look for part 2 right behind it. It will be coming out simultaneously. I hope you're resonating with the powerful ideas and stories of these people, especially Chesterton right now. It might hit you different depending on where you're spiritually located, whether you're a skeptic or a believer or somewhere in between on some kind of deconstruction journey. We're going to be continuing to explore what it means to live a life of deep meaning in a world that often feels fragmented and nihilistic. And this revelatory faith doesn't seem to come to us from the expected places. The prophetic voice doesn't seem to come from the pulpits and the seminaries all the time. It's breaking through in novels, poetry, activism, art, and the unexpected corners of culture. In Chesterton, we find that the prophetic voice is coming in the form of laughter and joy, which is amazing. We hope you'll continue to join us on this ongoing conversation. Until then, thank you for listening to the Subversive Orthodoxy podcast. If you love our podcast and find it meaningful, please leave a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with anyone who might resonate with this conversation. This has been the Subversive Orthodoxy podcast with Travis Mullen and Professor Inchowski.
Spiritually, I want to jump off a cliff without a parachute like I'm high on cannabis and skip through fields naked like I wonder if I could drift or if I could drift through it. Dancing through moonlight under nighttime skies, forgetting the world's lies, meanwhile I'm fine. Looking through a stained glass oceanic scene. Say hi to human beings with a smile unseen. Grabbing wildflowers as I slide down hills after a rain, after sun.